Hey guys, welcome back to the What Comes to Mind series. Today we are on episode 12 and our topic today is about the liver. So let's get started with some interesting key facts and functions. And before I go into those exactly, if you have not watched the previous episode on the kidney, I would strongly advise to because there is a lot of similarities between the kidney and the liver. So the link should be somewhere here for the kidney episode. However, in terms of the liver itself, the key difference is that the liver is actually our food processor. It actually helps us to process the proteins, the carbohydrates, the fats that we get from the digestive tract into a form that we could utilize or store if needed. But also it's really known for metabolism. So trying to detoxify chemicals, detoxify and metabolize drugs, and all sorts of functions. So what I'm going to do is break them down in each one, timestamp them for you, so you can always come back and check on them again. So let's start with the first function. So I wanted to start with a function that people may or may not actually know about. And it's that notion of synthesizing proteins that are going to help us to clot our blood when needed. So unfortunately when we get cut, we need a lot of key proteins, clotting proteins, to help to close that wound so it doesn't seep a lot of blood out over time. But within that remit, the liver is also responsible for processing damaged and old red blood cells. And there's a lot of complications that arise when that process isn't actually functioning properly. And the reason why is one of the byproducts of sorting red blood cells out is bilirubin. And you may have seen bilirubin in action because when somebody has some sort of liver problem, you might see their skin go a bit yellow or the eyes over here go a bit yellow. And there's that notion of a jaundice. And that's because of excess bilirubin in the body that should have been removed out. And liver is one of the key kind of markers of the liver and function of the liver is to remove that waste product quickly before it becomes a problem. So somebody who has liver damage, that's actually going to be an issue. But another more common function of the liver is actually the metabolism of fats. So in the liver produces cholesterol and it also produces bile. And both of them are responsible to help break down fats. So the bile goes into the small intestines and helps to process fats, whereas the cholesterol is used as a kind of transport protein to and from cells in the liver. So metabolism of fats is a very crucial part of the liver's process. So some of the similarities with the kidney is this function now, which is the metabolism of carbohydrates. So in the kidney we talked about the different hormones used to increase or decrease the level of glucose circulating in the blood. The liver actually takes out sugar from the circulation and stores it in a product known as glycogen. Now we can't talk about fats and carbohydrates without proteins, and the liver also has some interesting functions for the protein where we know that proteins are made up of amino acids, and liver can actually change the amino acids on proteins so it can be used as energy. Remember, we use sugars, then fats, then proteins in that order for energy source, or it can actually modify proteins into carbohydrates and fats, which is interesting to use. Now, funnily enough, one of the byproducts of that process is actually ammonia, something that if you have smelled, you really don't want to smell again because it can actually give you a headache. And then the liver actually converts that into a more safer product known as urea. And that urea is then excreted through the kidneys into the urine. So you may have heard of that term urea, commonly associated with a product in the urine. So now on to drug and drug metabolism by the liver. This is a crucial part of how the liver actually functions and why a lot of researchers focus on what the liver will do to a drug that they make. Because the metabolism is done by these enzymes known as cytochrome enzymes or CYP enzymes. And when that actually happens, the drug can be metabolized too quickly or not enough, and that can play a role with how potentially useful the drug actually is or potentially how harmful it might be. So that's why hepatic metabolism, so hepatic is another term used for the liver, is really crucial in how drugs function and how useful they may or may not be. So as if those functions were not enough, there's a few more that are actually quite interesting but not fairly commonly known to the wider public. And it's that the liver actually stores iron and copper and trace elements and is stored in the liver and released when needed if the body actually requires it. However, when there are actually problems in those two, it can lead to certain rare diseases that are unfortunately not easy to treat. However, I'll go through that towards the end of the video. And in essence, in terms of the process of the liver, when there's something is broken down in the actual liver, it can go through either the bile or the blood. And if it goes through the bile, it goes through the digestive tract and is excreted out as stool. But if it goes through the blood, as we know from yesterday's episode, it gets processed through the kidney and then it gets filtered out as urine. So that's how waste products are kind of selectified and classified, depending on where they actually need to go. But now on to the juicy part, which is what comes to mind when I actually think of the liver. And there's two things. One is actually regeneration. For somebody you may or may not know, the liver has a remarkable ability to actually regenerate if portion of the liver is compromised or actually damaged. Depending on the reports, you can roughly say if half of the liver was actually compromised, within a month, if it was given the time and the space, it could actually regenerate back to full capacity. And I'm not going to fall over, but it blows my mind that actually is capable within our bodies, that there's an organ in our body that if nearly half of it was compromised in some capacity, the liver has that capability of regenerating itself. And I sometimes get fascinated by the body all the time, left, right, and center, with different organs like I've discussed in these episodes. But the liver has something very unique that other organs don't have. And it's that regeneration capabilities, which is you think in sci-fi movies or comics, but our organ in our body, somewhere there, actually can do that. And the other one is actually in metabolism. Now I've gone through different ways the liver uses the word metabolism for fats, proteins, carbohydrates, and even drugs. But it's a notion of how many enzymes and little workers are in the liver to process all of these very tiny molecules, which is mind-boggling to even think of. And to add, looking at it clinically and medically, the different enzymes are used to test to see if the liver is actually functioning is remarkable. I'm not going to go into them, but there are tons of actual enzymes that can be used in liver function tests to see if the liver is actually functioning very well. And it shows how far research in clinical medicine has gone, where we can use very tiny molecules to deduce what's actually happening in a certain organ, and in this case, the actual liver. Now you would think, because of this remarkable regeneration capabilities, the liver should be fine, we shouldn't really have much conditions. However, unfortunately we do, and they can arise from many different sources. Sometimes there are inflammations in the liver due to viruses, so we know them as hepatitis A, hepatitis B and C, and they can come from any number of actual sources or events. And as much as we can try and minimize ourselves from viral infections, sometimes it's not always the case, and that's why we have certain vaccines to help against them where possible. But a lot of them can also arise from evidences and situations where we can have a lot more control over. And one in particular is, of course, alcohol and the chronic consumption of that chronic bombardment on the liver. Even though it has the ability to regenerate itself, you still see fatty acid liver disease, or you actually see cirrhosis. The cirrhosis is actually the scarring of the liver tissue. And what sometimes hurts as researchers, when we see an organ going to that extent, even when it has the ability to regenerate itself, it shows sometimes how unfair we treat our body, whether we know it or not. And to think a liver that has the ability to regrow, we can bombard it so badly, infect it so badly, or damage it so badly that it can go to a point where it's actually beyond repair. And that's something we could and should try and prevent where possible. Now, earlier I mentioned iron and copper and how the liver stores them as trace elements and releases it into the blood whenever needed. However, when there's actual complications in the way it's stored and utilized, it can actually cause a lot of problems. And one of them, in terms of iron and having some sort of genetic abnormality in how we store iron, causes the condition known as hemochromatosis. You should be able to see it here. And that's essentially some sort of malfunction in the way we store iron. And progressively that iron starts to increase and overload. And if that does, that's actually very damaging to our bodies in many forms, in terms of damage to other organs and damage to certain joints as well. And if we have some sort of malformation and issues with copper and the way we store copper, causes the condition known as Wilson's disease. And in that, similar to hemochromatosis, there's a lot of copper overload. And that can also cause all sorts of unfortunate conditions for our body due to increase in the amount of copper we are actually storing. So even though they are trace elements, they can still, if kept in slightly higher amounts, can actually be very damaging for the body. Who thought that iron and copper could be such a problem? Although they are rare diseases, we wouldn't say they are rare for those unfortunately diagnosed with them. So in terms of protecting the liver, we know excessive alcohol consumption is very damaging to the liver. We know excessive drug use is a huge problem for the liver. And sometimes it's the way we perceive our organs. Sometimes we are under addictions and it's not easy, even though we may know what to do, the addiction is so difficult to get out of. And that's why I talk about nutrition, exercise and psychology because I know all three are as important. You may be aware of the nutritional consequences of taking this or that, but maybe because you're addicted, your actual psychology is not in the right frame of mind to look after the liver. So that's why sometimes, even in a medical point of view, and we're talking about organs, mental health is really important. And I think for the liver, it's that organ that gets a lot of bad press. You may see people on the news with cirrhosis or with bad liver damage due to drug or alcohol abuse or certain viral infections, but there are ways that we can minimize those from actually occurring. And I think for this particular organ, it's not just seeking physiological organ advice, it's also the mental health and support for people who may be under those addictions that are damaging their liver, to seek help and seek company to hopefully try and get out of those bad scenarios which are affecting organs just like the liver. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Apologies, it is quite windy, so if the audio isn't great, do let me know in the comments and I shall work out a way to get some even more better audio quality for you guys. I hope you found the information really useful today, and even the thoughts that might have come to your mind about the liver. And please do let me know in the comment section below, as I would love to hear your perception and your views about the liver and the bad press it might get and the incredible regeneration capabilities this particular organ has. And hopefully see you tomorrow for a new phase of the series, which I'll keep a surprise because I think you're gonna enjoy it. Take care and thanks for watching. See you soon.